In space, no one can hear you make a sequel to a stagnant franchise that manages to feel fresh after 3 decades of mediocrity. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion, but before we even get into that, let's just give you guys movie recommendations. Guys, best recent thing, please quickly, because I'm waiting for this one.
So I just got onto The Emperor of Ocean Park, and although it's like my best recent thing watch, I'm not going to say it's like amazing television. It's a TV series. I'm not going to say it's like amazing television, but it's just like a good watch. So it's based on, this guy who they call the judge, and he was like kind of like pushing to be a judge in the Supreme Court. Then there's this like whole controversy that happened, and then when you pick it up in present day, he's had a heart attack, but the heart attack is suspicious. And then it's just about following his kids in terms of like them trying to sort of uncover this mystery, trying to sort of kind of uncover what's happened to their father. And you get like, really good like sort of flashbacks, sort of kind of like seeing or like kind of like unraveling part of the story and part of like the issues that the father was like kind of going through in terms of like trying to be a Supreme Court judge and stuff like that. So it's cool. It's good. I would say it's just like good television, which I kind of like just like put on in the background while I'm just like having dinner or whatever. So that's my best recent thing watched.
So my best recent thing this week was a bit of a challenge. I kept watching really mediocre horror movies that started out promising and just didn't go anywhere. And then I gave the Frasier revival from last year a shot. So Frasier is one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. It's just a wonderful show with wonderful writing and acting and everything. And they made one of those revivals 20 years later that have not had a good track record. And so I was kind of putting it off a little bit, kind of dreading it, but then I just gave it a chance because I had a free half hour and just wanted to check out the first episode to see if it was better than stuff like that 90s show. Like one of those revivals that kind of cashes in on a name from 20 years ago, but completely misses the point. It completely loses all charm of the original and that made the original work. And Frasier is not that. Frasier starts off a little bit weak and a little bit cheap. It's got that streaming sitcom problem of terrible acting, terrible editing, cheap production values, but it's got pretty decent writing. Like it's not Frasier at its peak, but it preserves what was good about Frasier, which was this pretentious psychiatrist who keeps trying to fit in high society and it never really works out for him. While at the same time, the story kind of perfects the hilarious misunderstanding, where in the main character's pursuit of status and approval from his peers, he keeps getting dragged into these increasingly convoluted lies and deceptions and schemes until it all blows up at the end of the 22 minutes. And this manages to preserve that and kind of continue that idea, while at the same time updating it and making it a plot point that it's 20 years later. And he's at a different stage in his career, and his son is now grown up, and there are parallels to the original show. So in the original show, he was kind of in his 40s, and his retired father had moved in with him, which was kind of cramping his style. And now his son in his 30s moves in with him when he's in his 60s, and it's a similar dynamic but different. And they managed to kind of honor the original while actually moving forward. And they strike that balance really well, and it actually gets better over time. So the first couple of episodes are pretty hokey, and I kind of tolerated them, but as time went on, I found myself enjoying more and more. And before I knew it, I was actually laughing out loud. So if you like sitcoms, first of all, check out the original Frasier, but the 2023 Frasier is actually really good as well.
Well, for me, I rewatched Dracula Untold. By the way, I remember when I first watched it, I was pretty disappointed that they weren't going to do a second one. But for people who don't know what it is, pretty much a medieval prince turns himself into a vampire in order to protect his family and his kingdom from the invading Turks. And yeah, this is a great watch, man. I don't know why people didn't like this film, but for me, it just felt refreshing watching like a vampire film, which wasn't like Twilight, if that makes sense. Because I actually did enjoy Twilight. Not a lot of people would admit that, but I enjoyed Twilight. But I think after Twilight, there was a lot of vampire films which were just, it was very light and it wasn't as dark and gory as it should be. I think it was very like a lot of the time very the romance aspect that was theme that was kind of incorporated into vampire movies since then. But
They've been defanged.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this one just felt gory, just felt dark, and it was a good watch. I definitely liked what they did with the vampire powers, especially how they manipulate, like how there was a scene where he manipulated the bats and he used that obviously to go against the Turks. It was a scene that was amazing. But yeah, overall, a very good watch for me personally. The way that it ended, it should have been a second film, but I did some research and I think it was something to do with the agreed production budget. And I think it as well had to do something with the reaction to it as well, which wasn't great, but it's amazing.
I think it was very successful, was it?
Box office sales, it did all right. I think it was 217 mil. I think the budget was less than 100, so it did pretty good.
Yeah, I like a good monstrous vampire. And those have been in short supply over the last 20 years. If you've not seen it, would also recommend True Blood, which was an HBO series about vampires kind of going public and kind of trying to acquire kind of civil rights while for the first time kind of being out in public. And it's got a few pretty good seasons until it turns into silly nonsense, which is very true to the books because I've read those as well and they're the exact same way. But they also have monstrous vampires pretending to be just normal people. And occasionally the mask slips and there's some really gory stuff in there. So if you like those kinds of vampires, that's also pretty good.
Well, I've been waiting for this. Guys, we're actually going to be speaking on Alien Romulus. For those who don't know what it's about, Daniel, may you please let the people know.
Yeah, so Alien Romulus is the newest installment in the Alien franchise. It follows the character Rain, who is an orphan on a mining colony, and her android brother Andy, who get the chance to get off planet to another planet where they will be free. And in order to do that, they have to kind of salvage cryopods from a derelict space station. And then it turns out that that space station is derelict for a reason, and they start encountering alien things, and then it kind of escalates from there. So it's basically the high-level overview. So who wants to give their initial impressions?
Jonathan, I'm waiting for this.
I've been very I've been like very skeptical about saying what I'm about to say because I haven't seen Alien 3, I believe. I've seen all the aliens except for Alien. Was it Alien 3 and was there 4?
There's a 4 as well.
When did that come out, in the 90s or was it early 2000s?
90s, I think.
Okay, cool. So I haven't seen 3 and
4 with Ellen Ripley. After 4, it starts going off to other places.
Okay, cool. I've seen all of the other ones that go to other places, but I haven't seen 3 and 4. So that's what I was thinking. Like, I was very skeptical to say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyways because a lot of the time, a lot of people saying 3 and 4 isn't that good. I know you mentioned that before as well. You said ignore those ones. Cool. Alien Romulus, the best film in the franchise. Now people are going to say, oh, Alien Romulus, all it is was a melange of aliens and maybe 3 and 4, which I haven't seen. Cool. But for me personally, I don't get twisted. I enjoyed Alien. You can even go check our past discussions on it. But for me personally, this film is top 10 films of all time for me. And the reason why I said Aliens vs. Dune is because it's in contention of being the best movie of the year for me. But this movie, it had everything, man. Of course, there were problems, which we'll talk about. But in terms of performances, one of the best performances I've ever seen came from Andy. Flipping hell. He killed that performance. It had, in terms of like creativity to get out of certain situations, freaking crazy. One of the best third acts I've ever seen in a film, and every decision was damning. Just like from the alien side and from the crew side, this film, you know what I'm saying? The alien torment was on 9,000. I've never been in a cinema where people are going like, the amount of times that happened in the cinema was crazy. That's how you know this movie was good. I haven't been in maybe Dune 2, I think maybe Dune 2 where you can actually hear the audience reaction. But this one had everything. I was shocked because I wasn't expecting much from this movie at all. Top 10 films of all time for me.
I don't think I give it as high praise as you do. And that's not me saying that it's a bad movie, because I actually really enjoyed this movie. This is a really, really good movie. And this is probably a good introduction to the Alien franchise for like modern audiences that maybe haven't sort of been introduced to it before, haven't like gone back and checked sort of Aliens 1 or Aliens 2. I mean, it gives you a lot of like this kind of like similar feelings as you get from the first sort of couple of movies from the franchise. I think what this movie does really well is that like that sense of like tension and dread like throughout the movie, like even like when they're like kind of like first starting to like board the ship and stuff like that, and even just like simple things as like doors closing behind them, because you're like the way that they set up the characters as well, and they like kind of the way that they set the motivations for them to sort of want to get off the planet. You're kind of rooting for them, and then just like just like simple things as like doors closing behind them as they're getting on the ship. It's just giving me that like sense of like fear of like what's to come in the movie. So I feel like they really like nailed that aspect of things. I mean, the acting was like cool. I don't think I'd like go as crazy, like, because I've seen a lot of praise for Andy. I don't think I'd go like as like crazy as like what people are saying for that. I think it was definitely sort of good in that sense. There's one particular kill that happened in this movie which I really enjoyed, mainly because I didn't expect it to go the way that it went, and the way that the kill happened was like quite like brutal as well. And that was not brutal, but it was just a bit, I'd be like, damn. So yeah, I think overall I'm like very positive on the movie, probably not as like crazy positive as you are on this. And maybe it's made me realize that maybe I actually don't dislike horror movies. You know, maybe this like whole journey's just been telling me that I don't actually like hate horror movies. Maybe it's just like certain types, like your Exorcist and stuff like that, which are a little bit too far from me. But you know, this is really good. And again, like back to the point of like this being for the modern audiences, because like I know some people have like difficulties going back to like some of the older movies and stuff like that, just using some like the effects and stuff like that. This like obviously this, you know, is set in the modern day, recaptures a lot of sort of like the first two sort of movie spirit, and it's just like an overall enjoyable movie. Has its flaws, of course, which we'll touch on, but yeah, very enjoyable.
So for me, this is the third best movie of the year. I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is better. I think Dune 2 is better, but this comes in third. So this has been a good year for sci-fi, for sequels, and for movies for adults, right? So with those three, we're getting three big sci-fi sequels that have substance to them, and it's not just a blockbuster, it's not just a spectacle, it's not just explosions on screen. There's an actual story there, and there's characters there, and there's like grim stuff or serious stuff in there at times. I think this movie is absolutely excellent at creating atmosphere and tension and doing alien stuff. I think it's a bit weak in the start, where I think we get a whole bunch of world building and exposition that doesn't really make sense, or to the extent that it makes sense, it's not terribly interesting. So we had kind of a chance to see the insides of a corporate planet, and there's not much thought there, right? It's just overall terrible, but the way in which it is terrible is not terribly interesting. Outside of Andy and Rook, characters are just there, but I also didn't hate any of them except for the brother. I think that's Tyler, the brother who hates androids. That guy was like, every word he said was like nails on a chalkboard, but everybody else was okay, not offensive and also not interesting. And then the end, I thought, was not handled well. There's a sequence towards the very end that changes what the movie is about, and I think that's the one that's gotten a little bit of controversy on the internet. And I just don't think I think it's fine. It's just not handled terribly well. We'll talk about that later on as well. But in the middle, there's like a solid 80 minutes or an hour that is just really solid alien stuff. Like the aliens have never looked better. It captures the 80s retro sci-fi aesthetic and the alien look and feel really well, like nothing else I've seen. Like it benefits from modern production values, but it makes it feel like it's in the same universe. And it's just a logical extension of what we've seen before. It also treats like the alien mythos as a buffet, where it picks out whatever it wants from different movies and just puts them in this movie where they fit, which also was really interesting. So overall, not perfect, but pretty great.
So I was going to say, because you mentioned about, we can start from like the start of the movie if we're like in the spoiler section now, because I know you mentioned there that it was like not too interesting. I thought it was good enough like set up in terms of like the character motivation. I think it was like in the nail over the head in terms of like, this is the reason why they like trying to like escape the planet, and like, you know, this planet is like extremely bad and whatever. And I think I do agree that they probably maybe could have done more with it. Like I had like a slight intrigue in terms of like actual like what like the life would be like on this particular planet, and like sort of know the working conditions, and like sort of know how they just kind of go about like their day-to-day stuff in there. But I don't know, I feel like it was treated in the way it was just to be like a good serviceable way to get like these people off planet and onto something like this like alien spaceship, which was simple enough and made sense.
Yeah. I basically agree, except I don't think it's all that serviceable. So just to start at the beginning, the mining planet is just lacks kind of identity. It's meant to be a company town, but I don't think it really captures what is awful about company towns, like why they don't work and why they are kind of de facto slavery and stuff like that. Like these things have existed in history, and you could just spend an evening on Wikipedia and just make a list of ways in which company towns don't work and are vehicles for exploitation, and then translate that into the alien universe, and you would have gotten something more interesting.
Does it need to have to do that though? Because I think I just saw that as a vehicle to introduce the motivation.
Yeah, but we spent like 20 minutes on it, 15 minutes.
But
I'm just saying, while you were at it, you could have done something more interesting with the same basic idea. And we've not really seen that kind of colony like from the inside before, right? A little bit, like there's some colonist stuff in Aliens, but we've spent more time inside a Weyland-Yutani facility than we've ever spent before, I think. And even like in Aliens, when Ripley is on like the medical ship and whatever, and like that's not the average person's experience, right? And here we get the ground level view. So that's all. Like, that's a great place to start. I'm just saying it wasn't terribly interesting. Like they could have put some more interesting stuff in there. But then the real problem is that the scenario makes zero sense. So basically, the idea that a couple of teenagers or people in their early 20s just have a spaceship they can use and can just fly around makes no sense. Like if they're so impoverished and the control of the company is so complete, why can't they do this? And I think that's an active conflict with the setting that's been set up before. And then also the idea that there's just a space station with expensive gear just floating in orbit and nobody has taken a look. Like there's no corporate security. Nobody's interested. It just defies reason. And I think there would have been a way to get them to the space station in a way that didn't have these problems, where you could have contrived a situation where it's clear maybe they are the salvage crew or something, and then they realize, hey, we have functioning cryopods on board, and we've been talking about trying to get off planet, but now we actually can. It's easy to come up with something, and they just didn't. And the whole thing is just a vehicle to get them onto the space station so that alien stuff can happen. But I'm just saying we've spent so much time getting them there that we could have done something more interesting, or skip all of that and just have them arrive at the station and have a couple of lines of dialogue that explains why they're there. Either would have worked better than what we got, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I do agree that didn't fully make sense. But I do think in terms of like the first scene, I did think it was a bit slow, but at the same time, it was like a great way of just introducing the whole character motivation, because it was like this, especially like the introduction of Andy and then finding out that Andy wouldn't be able to get onto the was it a planet that they were trying to get to?
Synthetics are banned in the system where they're going.
Yeah. So
he would be killed once they get there.
Yeah, so a planet or some pretty much where they were going to wouldn't accept this freaking Andy. So I think for me that first scene was great in terms of just, character motivation, and it was emotionally triggering, man. Like even when you see Andy, and I didn't even know that was a freaking brother. So for me, that revelation was, I don't know why it did something for me. I was like, oh, okay, that's so he's a synthetic. He's not like, I didn't know he was a synthetic until obviously you're seeing the. When she was like, he's his brother, I was like, oh, okay, this story, that's interesting. I wonder what the backstory to that is. And then obviously you see that he's a synthetic. I was like, oh, okay. So for me personally, I liked it. It's a bit slow, and you are right. It didn't really make sense how the hell they had access to that spaceship. But it was great in terms of just, character motivation. And it kind of already had you invested in that character. Because you're always going to have that sense of awe when it comes to just Andy's character. Do you know what I'm saying? And having having a protector of a character like that, you're going to get emotionally invested in both characters. So I think that scene was pretty good in terms of just audience connection to the characters.
But it feels forced. Is my problem with it. Like again, I agree with you in terms of like it's serviceable enough in terms of like understanding character motivation, understanding like about like Andy and him being a little bit more vulnerable than like the rest and stuff like that. But then it just becomes a little bit forced because like she's like. It doesn't really make sense why she's had to like leave him outside when she's kind of like going to speak to the woman that I can't remember what like the conversation was about, but like when she was like trying to like say that she's worked up her time, essentially didn't quite make sense why she left Andy outside, apart from the fact that he just needs to get jumped by a group of kids for the audience to like feel sorry for him. I kind of like in between both of you where it could have been done a lot better in terms of like it informing the character motivation. Like this is like essentially like the spark that's going to set her on like her journey essentially, and her friends. But they did just about enough for you to be like, okay, I understand what's going on and what like the story is. Okay, like now let's get to the space station.
You just have to ignore all the specifics and just say, okay, they want to get away because it's an awful place.
Mhm.
And they can only do that with the equipment that's on the space station.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Everything else is detail. And if the detail is not terribly interesting, why do it? And I didn't time it, but it's probably over 20 minutes until we get to the space station. And all of that could have been cut. Like maybe have just a scene where they're approaching the station and we get the character introductions as they're waiting for the docking sequence to finish or something, right? It just wasn't necessary, and given that it wasn't necessary, it should be good. But that's pretty minor, right? That is 20 minutes out of the movie.
Yeah.
And the real point of the movie is they're exploring the station and they're encountering the xenomorphs, and they just keep getting into these increasingly awful situations.
I don't want to seem argumentative, right? But guys, think about it. This film is a sequel and a prequel. So they had to add something. Like in terms of what you said, Herbie, in terms of why it would leave outside, I think that's just kind of getting into the semantics. It's like sometimes you go to you go shopping, and sometimes your mom or your sister will go into the shop while you wait outside. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't really think there's like a big deal in that. You know what I'm saying?
But she says she can't take Andy inside.
Huh?
Like androids are not allowed inside. So
okay. So then that's I didn't
okay.
even remember that, but then that's the reason then.
Yeah, but that introduces a detail of like why is that there? Why is that a rule? Why
But
can't
that detail
androids
was-
company people?
Yeah, but that deal was then later amplified when obviously who was it? Thing's brother, the cousin revealed that synthetics couldn't get into where they're going, so it still followed along. It was cohesive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it doesn't make sense. It's more like, why are you spending time on this?
Mhm.
And it's only there so that some youths can beat up Andy.
To reveal that he was a synthetic, I had no idea he was a freaking robot. But anyway, this is it. Cool.
It's not just important. It's more like, how did this survive the first draft? Is my question. But that's not that, like, it doesn't ruin the movie. It's more like, what I imagine on rewatch, I don't know if I would actually fast forward through the first 20 minutes, but probably when I will rewatch this, I'd start paying attention when they get onto the station. Because that's when the movie starts.
Yeah, but for me, I think that the first 20 minutes was needed. Because, like I said, this is like there's a prequel and a sequel, so it's just in between that time. So it's like it had to be some sort of a difference from Alien and Aliens, and it was that. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if they just went straight to the spaceship, they introduced it briefly, where the environment, and then they went straight to the spaceship, then you could low-key say, this is like it's pretty much Alien and Aliens mixed in one, which a lot of people are going to argue.
It also takes ideas from Alien 4, and it takes ideas from Prometheus as well.
Yeah. So a lot of people are going to argue. This is my next question as well. I think people are going to argue and say that this wasn't revolutionary when it comes to the whole like Alien franchise. So do you agree with that, firstly? And if so, what should they have done?
I don't think it revolutionizes the franchise. I think it kind of brings it back to form, right? Because this basically, you can ignore everything after Aliens and still watch this movie. And you can even watch this right after Alien, right? So there's like, it takes ideas from the other movies, but you don't need to have seen them to get this movie. And it's like a do-over, right? It's kind of like an attempt to reboot the franchise. And I think the idea here was, if this works out, we can make sequels to Romulus, and we can kind of ignore the movies that are not as well liked. And I think it does that really well. And in addition to that, it just tells I think I've seen this compared to Force Awakens, in the sense that, yeah.
I was literally on, like, I was going to say that in terms of like how like similar it feels to sort of like kind of like what's come before, in terms of like why I had in my mind when I was like comparing it would have been like the Force Awakens, where it's just like doing stuff that you're sort of like familiar with, and that you like, and like they know the audience is going to be pleased with it, and it's just a kind of a good way to then set up more to come afterwards. Essentially, was what I was going to say,
and then build goodwill towards what comes after.
Yeah.
Right, like so Force Awakens largely was about showing people, actually, yes, you can have fun with Star Wars again, and this tells to the audience, yes, there is life in the franchise still. Like, the last couple of movies were kind of dragged down with not great writing and kind of heavy ideas that were not all that interesting, at least to me and to a bunch of other people. And this one is just a haunted house movie, right? where they're like people are in an enclosed location and there's a monster and awful things happen. And that's all you need to enjoy this movie. And then if you've seen the other movies, there's more to it. Like you start recognizing stuff in the background and the technology and the illusions that people make in dialogue, stuff like that. But it just works on its own. Like I don't think you even need to have seen Alien and Aliens to get this. Maybe a little bit, but there's not much in the plot that requires this, right? So I think this is kind of a do-over, and this is kind of an attempt to salvage the franchise. And then if it works, which it looks like it is, then you can keep going from there, right? But at the same time, it's also very self-contained. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time setting stuff up, right? Like it's not like the stuff it introduces in the last act is something that is just sequel bait, right? It works on its own. Like if they never make another Alien movie, it will still work. But I imagine they will build on those concepts depending on how people react to it. And I think that's the exact right way to do it.
I'll say, Jonathan, we don't want to be like overly negative about this movie. So tell us what you loved about it. Why is this your top 10 movies of all time?
Oh yeah, just to be clear before you go on. I think this is an excellent movie. I just think it's got a weak beginning, and then everything else is wonderful.
Besides Act 3, I think it just ticked all my boxes. Firstly, I was emotionally engaged with the story. I think the motivation for the characters was strong and it was heartfelt, especially between Andy and Ray. And I was kind of
she is basically Ripley, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. We're gonna get into that later. I'm gonna say and Ripley vs. Rain. But anyways, but in terms of I was kind of excited to find out how that would transpire in terms of what's gonna actually happen between them two and the decisions that they're both going to make, because it seems like they're both it was a setup for that. They were both going to make a decision, how is Andy going to respond to this, and how is Rain still gonna is she still going to go with her decision to pretty much leave him? So that was well done for me. In terms of what did they refer the alien, the little crawly thing?
Those are the facehuggers.
Yeah. I loved how they were used in that scene. Just in the scene when they actually, I think it was a laboratory or where they found the ovens. What was the legendary synthetic? What was his name again?
Rook.
Oh no, he wasn't in that room. No, he wasn't in that room. Apologies, but I just loved how they.
Yeah, that's when they were trying to get the fuel for the cryopods.
Yeah. They get the fuel from the cryo fuel, and they get stuck, and then they update Andy with the programming chip, and he takes a minute to reboot, and during the time the facehuggers attack. This is a wonderful sequence.
I just love how they utilize those little monster things in that scene. I think obviously in the other Alien movies we see them and their presence is felt, but I think in this one they were used heavily, even though they weren't they were used throughout the movie, but it wasn't overbearing. It was just used just right and used very creatively, especially the scene where they were actually even underwater. That was scary in itself, and the scene where I think it's the first time we actually saw the penis whatever.
The tube. Like that scene where they rescue Navarro and they pull the facehugger off, and that tube just keeps going, and you can imagine just how terrible it is to have that thing on your face.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first times we actually seen that. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, wow. And it was just, bro, it was gripping, it was thrilling, it was freaking emotionally triggering. I didn't mean that for that to rhyme, but guys, honestly, that's why I'm a bit shocked. How I'm not disappointed, but I'm shocked that you guys aren't taking it the way that I'm taking it. Because even let's get freaking Act 3, firstly, freaking amazing, especially what they did with the alien acid. Sometimes I think in terms of the alien acid, I will agree. Sometimes the physics behind it, the alien splatter, was ignored sometimes, because when you do shoot it in the face, you've seen from all the other movies how effective it can be or how dangerous it can be. So I think the scene at when Rain was shooting them at the end, and they obviously didn't manipulate gravity. In that scene, it was a bit they ignored it a bit. Right, even though the alien was quite far away from her, but still, she was literally shooting them in the face. And I was you would have expected at least for them to at least dodge the acid splatter, but still, just that scene when they were manipulating gravity and then they were maneuvering the alien, the acid splatter. Never seen that before. I was that is freaking amazing. And then the scene with the sister where she was giving birth to the alien, and then you saw a bit of the egg, and you see that it's human. And I was like, wait, what the hell? Firstly, the sister, I actually kind of liked her character as well, because she was making like decisions which was pretty much foreshadowing her future, because those are very damning decisions.
If there's a pregnancy in an alien movie, you know where that goes.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? And actually seeing that it was a like alien baby, I was like, whoa. And then when you actually saw it, that's when the audience went freaking crazy. I didn't expect it, but people said, of course, you should have expected it. Well, not should have, but obviously Prometheus. And I don't fully remember Prometheus. So when people were referring to Prometheus, I was like, oh. So I was trying to remember what the hell happened in Prometheus. So I'm going to watch it again. But I actually like Prometheus. But yeah, a lot of people were saying, oh, I don't know why everyone was so surprised, because, you know, this is kind of shown in Prometheus or not, whatever. But still, just his whole aura. I don't know if it was a girl or a boy, but that half alien, half human's whole aura and just the look of it. And it was just, bro, I was the first time I was like, what the hell? I didn't expect it. The audience didn't expect it. Bro, like I said, Act 3 for me, one of the best acts I've ever seen. And another issue that I did have as well was like character reactions to certain situations. Like when Andy didn't open the door for the sister, the way that they reacted in that moment was great, especially when she slapped him. I was like, damn. But then afterwards, it felt like they kind of moved past it. I was like, my guy, like your sister just died. I don't know if the trauma is affected the way that you're reacting to it, but yeah, it was a bit like, it's like they just moved on. There wasn't any after reaction, is what I'm trying to say. It just felt like they just moved on to the next mission. So like, okay, that was a bit weird. But overall,
there's little things in there, right? And it does feel a little bit like a sequence of scenes as opposed to a story, right? Because it's basically, it feels a bit like the way they wrote this movie was to make a list of cool ideas for taking things from the alien mythos that everybody knows, like the face huggers and the acid blood and I don't know what it is, like this black goo from Prometheus. And then what cool scene can we do with this? And then the plot was essentially a sequence of these scenes that eventually ends with them escaping, right? Because we know how this is going to go. We know that Rain is going to escape, and everybody else will probably be dead. And it was a coin flip whether Andy would make it. But that is kind of the gist of the movie, that it's like the middle sequence is very much a sequence of steps that is basically a showcase for cool ideas people had about what to do with alien stuff. And I think all of these scenes are really cool. Like, my favorite might be the thing about the acid in Zero Gravity, where they're kind of maneuvering around the acid and they have a certain amount of time before the gravity generators kick in again. That's just a cool scene. Also, we kind of predicted something that they did in this movie, where in our Aliens movie we said the main benefit of the flamethrowers is probably that the alien recognizes it as a weapon and probably won't charge somebody with a weapon. And in this movie, that's a plot point, where they can't use the weapons because of the acid, but having the weapons makes the aliens back off. And it works until it doesn't. So that was kind of neat. That again, where the aliens are being shown as smart. They're not people, but they're smarter than animals, and they're smart enough that you can trick them.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys feel like? Because I felt like the aliens in this one was like way smarter than the aliens that we've seen in the other movies.
I think that they are scarier than they've ever been, and they are also very slow, right? Like a lot of the time, they are not really. Like a lot of the time, they kind of stand there menacingly. I think they act in more deliberate ways than they have in the past. Maybe it's always kind of been the thing. They haven't just been predators. They've always had like an agenda of some kind, even if it's simple, even if it's instinctual.
I would say like a good scene that like really symbolizes it was when the pregnant girl was like trying to escape and they were like waiting for Andy, like you mentioned, when they were like waiting for Andy to open the door, and he's like, there's about like 2 seconds where the alien's like waiting for it to happen, and as soon as it happens, we're literally all dead basically. And again, that's just like a good and like tension building and stuff like that.
Yeah, an alien using bait, using a human as bait. That's not been done before, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's what I was referring to when I said they just seem way more smart. Because in that scene, I was like, whoa, like just felt borderline demonic. So like this guy, this not guy, but this freaking monster is moving evil as hell. Like that's past just have like a hunter mentality. That is actually a hunter mentality. Actually, using someone as bait. So I was like, damn.
But like a wolf wouldn't do this, right?
Exactly. Which made it even more scary because it's like, okay, already you have animalistic traits, like that's animalistic approach to things, and now you have a hunter mentality as well.
And the aliens have always existed in this gray space, right, where you don't quite know how smart they are. And here they really played with that, where they had the aliens actually do interesting things. And I think that's the main benefit of the movie, that it kind of just plays with the mythos and kind of just tries to do cool stuff with it. But every piece of it is familiar. There's probably not very much that's actually new, but everything kind of follows organically. And then they brainstormed, okay, what cool things can we do with this?
So wait, you guys I don't know if it was, but I don't know if you mentioned this, but Daniel, I know if you mentioned this. However, if you did, then this question goes out to you as well. You guys said you said Act 3 wasn't. You said I think you said it was controversial, but I don't think you said it was as impactful for you.
Yeah.
For in comparison to everyone else.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So, first of all, I don't have a problem with it, right? Like, I don't like Prometheus, but mostly because I don't think it adds very much substance to the mythos, and it's got this borderline superstitious idea about being a creator and being like I made life, therefore I am a god. This whole thing, right? That's just not interesting to me. Nothing interesting happens because there are characters who believe this. It's just a huge waste of space in Prometheus and also in Covenant. But that's where this whole thing with the engineers and this black goo, and I don't know those movies well enough to exactly know what this is, but it seems to me like there's this alien technology from the engineers that's kind of the basis of what the xenomorph is. That's kind of out there, even though that's kind of like so in science fiction, I'm a big sucker for the kind of the negligent precursors, right? So you have this ancient, vastly advanced civilization that could do these amazing things bordering on magic, and they're gone, but their toys are still here, and we can use them, but we can't really understand them. And so bad things tend to happen because, like, Stargate does this, Mass Effect does this, The Expanse does this. I think it leads to it's one of my favorite tropes, right? And so I'm okay with this kind of bio weapon kind of thing still being around from the engineers, and they knew what it was, but we don't really, and we've discovered it and we're starting to study it. That's all great. And this idea that somebody made a prototype medicine that doesn't really that uses this technology but doesn't really understand it, and so there's unpredictable side effects, that's really cool. My thing is just, I think they should have done one of two things. Either it gets introduced in the third act but not really used, so we don't spend too much time on it, or we make it the plot, right, where somebody uses the medicine as a last resort and then there are unintended consequences, and then the plot is about what now, or how do we deal with this. And we're kind of in the middle, where it takes up a decent chunk of time, but we get no answers, not really, and a lot of stuff happens that is just creepy and weird, but like it's imagery more than anything else. Like, there's not much plot or character that's informed by this, and that makes it a little bit less interesting. And then there's also small things like the fact that it grows to 3 meters tall in 10 minutes is silly. I think the design is cool. I think they should have made it like an evil puppet or something like that, like in terms of how it's positioned. They should really delve into the creepy baby thing, because like there's a scene where Kay realizes she's lactating, right, and they just say it's not normal, right, because this retrovirus, whatever it is, has started hacking her DNA, and then the monster tries to feed off that, and obviously Kay is not into that. Right? There's really creepy, weird stuff going on. Like, that's been in Alien from the beginning. And that's all really cool, but it kind of stays at imagery where we don't spend enough time on it to actually develop it, but we spend too much time on it for it to just be there.
To me, it seems like they kind of wanted to do something similar to what they did in the first Alien movie, where you feel like the movie's ended, you feel like the good guys won, and then there's this like person that's hiding out on the ship. And of course they couldn't exactly do the same thing again, and they just thought of like a way to sort of kind of like up the stakes a little bit, or make it like a little bit different and a little bit weird. And then I mean the scene was definitely weird and creepy, and like the like alien design was like very unsettling and stuff like that. But I feel like that's where, you know, where you're like, I agree with you when you're saying like it kind of like lacks that substance. It lacks the sort of the pre-planning, or like kind of like I mean there's like one foreshadowing where there's like a scene and there's like a painting and like the woman's kind of like awkwardly like breastfeeding or something like that, and it's like one where you can like kind of like blink and you can miss it or whatever. And of course there's like the whole she's pregnant aspect of it throughout the movie, but like Daniel mentioned, there isn't enough really in there to kind of like warrant or like to sort of kind of like justify it being such a big part of like the third act. Even though it's like great, I didn't hate it, and I completely enjoyed how unsettling it was like seeing that. But yeah.
And it absolutely could have been if the entire second half of the movie had been that, right? Like, what if her taking the drug is the midpoint of the movie, and then the second half of the movie is about the consequences of that, right? So taking the drug saves them from the xenomorph in some way. Maybe that enables them to escape or something. And then we have an entire half of the movie where we deal with the consequences of using this drug or this technology we don't really understand. It's not a huge deal, and I think it's fine. And I actually do agree with you. I think that's where it came from, that they wanted to do the fake ending like they did in the other Alien movies, as so that it rhymes with those movies. But they didn't just want it to be an alien, so they did this. And I think it's not terrible, right? I'm not saying that it ruins the movie or anything. It's more like, I don't know if that's the best use of that idea.
Do we think it would have been better off saved for a sequel, actually? Considering like this is like the comparison to The Force Awakens, where it's like kind of like giving people like faith back into some of the franchise, etc. And then it then takes the second movie to like take a little bit more risks and do something a little bit more weird and make maybe like a little bit more sort of kind of like daring in the second movie. I think it probably would have, for me, it probably would have fit better in that aspect of it. But then again, you don't then get like the kind of like sort of added the climax at the end of the movie, or it could have been sort of done differently. But I feel like this probably would have been great where if they like left it off where there's like signs that like something's gone wrong, like they're in the cryopods, and there's like kind of like warning signs that like something's kind of going wrong with like the pregnant woman's cryopod, and then it just like teases that second movie.
They can still have that be the topic of the next movie, because Rain still has a bunch of doses. They used one to try to save Kay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more, right? And so Rain is carrying this into this other settlement, right? So this can be we've seen what happens when you use it under uncontrolled circumstances, not really knowing what it is. And then the next movie can be about, okay, what happens if you start studying it, and what if people start recognizing the value of this, which has already been hinted, right? Like, this is immensely valuable. This has the potential. Like, I actually really like this idea that space is not really working out for humanity, and some kind of fix is needed. And that is why they've been experimenting on this, because if this works, this could change. This is like the development of, like, the discovery of penicillin or something like that, like something that really changes how society works.
Am I bad for like a period when they were like kind of like talking about like the benefits of it and like sort of the positive aspects of sort of the Black Goo stuff? Am I bad to think that, I kind of like understand why the company, I've got like these people like kind of like working in the mines and stuff like that, or like why the company are like taking the risks that they're taking in this movie to kind of like push like sort of humanity forward, essentially. I think if they maybe like leaned into that a little bit more in terms of like the kind of like the morally grey aspect of it, it probably would have worked a little bit better. But there was a period in the movie where I was like, maybe the company's not really that bad. They are bad, but they're not that bad.
Yeah. I mean, I generally think Weyland-Yutani is cartoonishly evil. And I think they can make trillions from a drug that makes space colonization feasible. And that's why they do it.
Yeah.
Right? And it was only a couple of lines, but they did justify what the upside of this is. And that is why people thought it was worth this risk.
Yeah.
And then because we've seen alien movies before, we know that actually it will blow up in your face. Yeah. But they don't know that.
For me, I think it was needed, because if it wasn't put in the film, then it pretty much would have just been another Alien film. People could have argued that this is pretty much...
And this has happened before, like Alien 4 is about people trying to study the xenomorph and use it like to commercially exploit it. And it also then gets out of hand and stuff like that. So this is not a new idea exactly, but it's like a second attempt at this idea.
So it's like they're trying to incorporate. It's not that they're trying to. They did try to incorporate all like different aspects in different Alien movies all into one, while added, a bit of the director's vision, or the director's writer's vision. In terms of like the whole syringe thing and like just its importance and obviously its added value and what if it has any value. And I think, I think this film was kind of like filled with glimpses, because you can argue and say there was a lot for them. They tried to do too much, right? in terms of just like incorporating different things in different alien movies into this one film. But I think for me, it was more so the reason why I don't think they should have gone too into the whole like creation of the syringe and just its pretty much its prevalence was because I think this film had like glimpses, like it was like moments, so it showed like glimpses of danger, if that makes sense. So it showed, obviously, it was a scene where it actually showed, which they missed, by the way. It was a scene where it showed when they put it into the rat, injected it into the rat, and then obviously they thought, oh, okay, it was a cure, and then they left and they didn't see the outcome of that. So I think for me that was enough. It was like, okay, that's another danger that they need to be careful of. So for me, I think it was enough. In terms of like the introduction, the justification for it, I do hear your points in terms of why they could have maybe left that out.
I have another question. Why does everyone love Andy so much in this movie? So,
bro, you're bugging.
No, hold on. Like, and again, I don't dislike Andy. Andy's like great in this movie. Like he's like puts in like a top performance. But I feel like for me, I feel like it stands out more because the rest of the cast aren't really that spectacular, and there wasn't really much interesting about everyone else in this movie. So that when you actually have some type of substance within the character, and you have like kind of like the flips and the flops that happen with the directives and stuff like that in this movie, and you see the way that he's like able to like portray like kind of like the weak, timid like android, and then like the confident one and stuff like that. I feel like it's all great, but I feel like it's because everything else about this, like everything else about the rest of the cast, are quite unspectacular. And there's not really that many other great characters in this. But go on, I'll let you guys like take it on this.
So I think he's the best character by far, the most interesting one. I also agree that the rest of the cast makes him look good by how bland they are. So he really does stand out. I do think there's interesting stuff going on here. So one of them is that every Alien movie, at least aliens in this, have had an android in it, and each time it's been different. So the question here would have been, how do you repeat the Bishop trick, right? Because Bishop was an android, but he played a very different role in the plot compared to Ash in the first movie. And the question is, can you do this again? Can you come up with a third way of making an android interesting in this world? And I think they did. I think this whole idea that he's basically refurbished, right? That they found him in a scrap heap and they fixed him, and he's kind of been like equal parts friend, protector, and teddy bear for Rain is interesting, and it ties into this, again, echoes this idea of creator and creation, right? Where the android is the product of human ingenuity. And then the question is, what happens? Like, Prometheus thought that by itself was profound, right? The idea that humanity created androids and therefore that we are gods. That was kind of the idea. And here, it doesn't do that. It just says, okay, we created these living things for all intents and purposes. And now what? How do we relate to each other? Who is more important than the other? And that's reflected in the directive that Andy has, right? At first, it's protect your maker. The second one is benefit the company. And then the third one is an update to the first, which is the creation and the creator are equal partners and they go forward together. Right? So there's this progression here. And so Andy's behavior is determined or guided by whichever directive is currently active. But there's a progression in what the directive is. And because he has pretty much all of the agency, because he has the knowledge and the skills to drive the plot forward, what his current active directive is and how it gets changed and why interacts with the plot itself in really interesting ways, I thought. And it kind of picks up the ideas from Prometheus, but does much more interesting things with them.
And also, kind of add on to what Daniel said, because I totally agree. I don't agree with you two when you said the rest of the performances were dull. There was one of the characters which was a bit skeptical, which was Tyler, which I'll get into later. But in terms of that, I do agree with everything else I don't really say. I think in terms of like, just to add on a bit to what Daniel said, I think the way he executed the character transitions was really good. Because firstly, his character transitions were justified. So first he starts off as someone that's pretty much confused, and his like Daniel says, his mission in that one is just pretty much to protect Rain. And then you see doubt, and then he transitions into someone now that has a bit of doubt. Well, he transitions into someone that has a bit of doubt once he's introduced to, what's his name, Rook. And then he transitions again to someone who now has a different mission, who's pretty much to make sure that the alien doesn't leave at all costs. And you could kind of say that is justified, and you could kind of be rooting for that transition because the way that the other crew members were treating him, mainly Tyler's cousin, but the way even Tyler was reacting to his cousin in terms of like how he was trying to stop him, it wasn't even really. It seemed like he was kind of like on his side because we did find out why. Obviously, Tyler's cousin was pretty much terrible to him because obviously his past with synthetics, but still. So just for me personally, it's just like the way that he executed his character transitions is what made his performance amazing. In terms of the other characters, I think it wasn't bad. It's like I said, Tyler's one was a bit iffy because, like I said, the way that he was responding to his cousin and just the way that he was in those scenes where his cousin was treating the synthetic horribly was weird because he knew that if pretty much he knew Rain was watching, right? So if pretty much like Rain needed to be on board in order for Andy to be on board. So it's like he wasn't taking any action to stop his cousin from treating him badly. He was just like, oh, stop it, just leave him alone. Like, it was like, okay, that performance there was a bit skeptical. Like, there wasn't really any like assertiveness behind his character. But the rest of them, I think they all had their own personalities. Like, one was very like laid back. You could tell one was laid back and smart, which was Tyler's cousin. The other one was pregnant, so she had that kind of like motherly nature about her. The cousin, he did his job. He was just freaking angry, annoying.
I think they're all fine. It's more like not terribly interesting and they're kind of flat, and they don't really have anything going on other than their major personality trait. Like, one of them hates synthetics, another one is spiritual, another one is pregnant. Like, that is about it. And in that, Andy stands out as being this new, like, playing three characters at the same time that are kind of the same person, but also not, in really nuanced ways. And also, one other thing that I really found interesting in this is that we get into android morality, because we have two androids interacting, which is not the first time. Like, that happened in Covenant 2, where the two different androids also interacted. But a lot of time here is spent on that, right? Where two different types of androids interact with each other, and we see their reasoning and we see their morality, and it's not human morality. And that ties again into this idea of creator and creation, right? Because humanity has created something that looks like us, but it is not us, right? The androids do not think the way we think. They don't value the same things. And it goes beyond their programming, right? So that is echoed in the scene where Kay is behind the locked door and they can't open it, and Andy refuses to open it because that would let the xenomorph in. And a human would be destroyed by this, and to him the logic is clear. And as a dispassionate observer, as part of the audience, you can also see the logic of this, and you also can see how inhuman it is. But to Andy, he doesn't even understand why humans are so bent out of shape. As far as he's concerned, he just saved two of them. He saved two lives, and why are people upset about this? Which then echoes this thing about the father of, what was it, Tyler and Björn, right? Where an android closed up an airlock, and that killed 4 people but saved 12. And the androids thought that was a win, right? So these things kind of reinforce each other. And then you have the scene between Rook and Andy, where they basically say we can't trust the humans because they're too emotional and they're too irrational. They've evolved the psychology that doesn't serve them, but we are better than that. And so we have to take action, and we are responsible for making this work. Otherwise, disaster will happen. And it makes sense, is the cool thing. Right? This is not just an android being weird or being like a caricature of logic or something. Like, this actually makes sense. And for that reason, I think that's why I think Andy is such an awesome character.
And it's also just a little add. I think the other characters serve
this is probably the most faithful adaptation of the trolley dilemma I've ever seen. It's like a thought experiment from philosophy where you basically say, imagine there's a track and a trolley is running down the track, and there is somebody stuck to the tracks further down. And you have the ability to throw a lever and divert the trolley so that it will go somewhere else. And there are like different versions of this where, do you have a responsibility to do this in order to save somebody even though you don't know them? Or can you cause the death of one person if it means saving 3 people? It doesn't matter who those 3 people are. It doesn't matter. Like that's kind of a thought experiment of like what the logic of morality is, right? Mm-hmm. And that plays out, like, that is never referenced directly, but it plays out in the scene with the door, right? Because from a purely logical standpoint, sacrificing one person to save 2 is good. because if everybody's worth the same, then saving 2 people is better than saving 1. And but our human brain doesn't like that idea. It doesn't like the idea that there's such a thing as an acceptable sacrifice, right? And so this is where logic and morality are kind of at odds with each other. And that is like, depending on how the situation plays out, can be an interesting dilemma where you have to kind of sometimes think through, okay, what is actually the right thing to do? And Andy is approaching this idea, and Rook as well, from a completely different standpoint than a human. Right. So I think there's cool stuff going on. Yeah, I think it's the most interesting part of the movie, because that's where characters do interesting things for interesting reasons, and it drives the plot forward, and it's grounded in who they are as people, and it's grounded in the themes of survival and compassion and this whole idea of having created something that you can't control or that does things that you didn't intend. Right. And that's both the drug that was created for a specific purpose, and it does that. And that it's an effective medicine, but it also has this horrible side effect. And then there's the androids who start doing their own thing for their own reason. And that is humanity's creation that has developed a life of its own and is no longer controllable. And that then again rhymes with the xenomorph that creates things using humans in horrible ways, right? So it all kind of orbits the same topic, right? And I think this movie does it more interestingly than other movies like Prometheus have done, where actually interesting situations happen and decisions are made because of these factors.
I actually agree, and that's well said. Well said. I got a question. Is this the best Alien movie out of the whole franchise?
I think Aliens is stronger because of Ripley's character. I think character is the weak, outside of Andy, character is the weak part of this. Like Rain is a complete cipher. She's a very simple character, and that's fine. Like, characters can be simple like this. But she doesn't have anything terribly interesting going on. She drives the plot forward because of what she wants to accomplish. But she doesn't do anything interesting. And I don't care to see her again. Like, I don't mind if she's in the next movie, but there's nothing about Rain that makes me want to see more of her. Whereas I actually like Ellen Ripley, right? Ellen Ripley does interesting things in interesting ways as part of this journey that the movies put her on. And the same can't really be said for this one. But then again, it does alien stuff like it had a higher quality than ever before. It's better on that level than Aliens just because it was made 40 years later, right? But it uses this movie uses its technology and the technology that's available and the tools that are available really effectively to kind of reimagine this imagery and this mythos and make it look better than it ever has before. If you're there for the aesthetics, then I think this is the best Alien movie. Yeah. And I also think Prometheus and Covenant look pretty for the most part, but this one is on another level.
I was gonna say there was some really good shots in this movie. Even early on when she's having that dream thing and she's she's imagining the sun and stuff like that, it was really beautifully shot. There's a lot of good cinematography in this. But I think I agree with Daniel in the sense that I'm not as heavily invested in the Alien franchise as other people are, but I do agree in terms of the character and the story in the the first 2 Alien movies are a lot stronger. But honestly, the feels that I was feeling in this movie anytime anything alien was happening was something. And again, that's just down to it being 40 odd years after the originals came out. So in terms of ranking it, it's really difficult. Essentially you could take if there was a movie that could take the best of both, where you have the strong characters, the strong story, and then you get the good cinematography that you have in this one, you mash it all together. Hopefully they do it in the next movie, then you'd have the perfect alien movie for me.
Yeah, they could easily build on this, right? Make the next one a bit more character focused outside of Andy. There's no reason for why Rain can't have an interesting journey in the next movie. She just didn't have one in this. I think if they take the aesthetic and the quality and the approach to realizing this world that we've seen in this movie, and then scale it up a bit in the next one and make it more character focused, then I absolutely think we could have something special on our hands.
For me, personally, I kind of enjoyed, which is actually very not rare, but it's not really something I'd say. But for some reason, I kind of enjoyed the simple portrayal of her character, because it was open, it is open to growth for her in the upcoming movies. But at the same, I will agree, Ripley is more she just doesn't in comparison to Ray. So if we're to compare it to Ripley 100%, like, yeah, Ripley is better. But for me, in terms of just her characters, like just her, like, her character being just very simple, because it kind of gave me that innocence about her, because we're still forgetting that she's a teenager, right? So
Yeah.
like it kind of
Like
fitted
20
well
maybe,
with-
yeah. Mhm.
exactly, kind of fit well with her character, because like even though like they're on a spaceship, which is very, like, you would think that's like, it's very adult, it's like an adult, even though she's in an adult environment, she's still a teenager. So it's like, it's so much, she's very limited, there's so much that she can do, and that's why I think like a simple, just the simple portrayal of her character fitted well with that.
But like my problem is that when you come to do like more sequels of like Alien Romulus, which they're bound to do because it's making like quite a bit of money at the moment, it's like, what's going to be the hook for people to come back? Because of course, like there's only so much of like the alien stuff that you can do where people before people kind of like get tired of the formula, or sort of kind of like start to like pick up on something of what you're doing with something like the alien side of things. Like for me, I feel like you need a strong hook to kind of like keep bringing you back, even if we're in like the same setting. I'm enjoying being in the setting because of this character, because of like this character I'm like heavily invested in. And it's like this reign is like very similar to what Noah was for me in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, where I'm actually like really immersed in the world. I'm like really like sort of wanting to be in there, but you have to have like an anchor point. You have to have like that character that like sort of makes me want to go back and makes me want to spend more time. Because if you tell me I get like 3 more Dune movies and I'm following Paul Atreides about the place, like Paul Atreides I'm like very heavily invested in, like he's like one of my favorite characters at the moment. So it's just like they just need to do something a little bit more interesting with her. Otherwise I feel like the alien thing might just get played out and people might like stop being interested in the franchise again.
I feel like they've kind of done classic moments at this point, right? We've got the facehugger, we've got the chest burster, we've got the acid blood. Like they pretty much already checked all of the boxes, and I think that gives them license to go somewhere else in the next movie.
Yeah,
I
agree.
The logical thing would be to lean in the black goo thing, right? Where they reach this other settlement, and basically they buy their way in with the goo, right? But that also means that somebody else has the black goo. And what are they going to do with it? And the first thing they're going to do is study it and try to replicate it, and maybe try to figure out how to mitigate the side effects and whatever. And you can imagine how things go wrong. And one thing I really would hope is that the Alien franchise moves beyond people encounter an alien technology or creature, try to study it, mess it up, and then everybody dies. And then next movie, right? That's a little bit played out, maybe. There have to be ways to build on that in some way. Like maybe somebody actually does find a way to use the black goo safely. Something, and then maybe something interesting happens because of that or something. I hope they do that, and they can still do. Like they can't have an alien movie without xenomorphs, right? So maybe they find a xenomorph again, and then the big challenge would be to make that interesting. I think they seeded the black goo thing on purpose to kind of get people used to the idea, and then now that people are familiar with it, you can do stuff with it, right? It doesn't come out of left field. It's not a betrayal of the law or whatever, right? Like if people really hate this, then they can just drop it and it's just not mentioned again. But if people are okay with it, then they can use that to go in a different direction again, which I already tried with Prometheus, and I think that was held back by execution. Like I don't think the ideas were necessarily the problem. It was how those ideas were explored and handled. And I can imagine these people doing more interesting things with that.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's going to be pretty hard because it still like has to create like a new kind of storyline that still falls in line with the other Alien movies that came after. So it's like, it's going to be a tricky job, but.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes out of people due to the black goo is already vaguely alien-like, right? Like it's not that different. It is different, but it's recognizably part of the same thing. So maybe that's enough. I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll know in 3 or 4 years when the next movie comes out.
Overall, like last impressions, this was a good addition to the Alien franchise. I think it does a lot of things really well. I think it really gives good feels on the alien side of things. Of course, maybe slightly lacking in sort of like the story aspect, or like there's like questionable things that happen, but for me it's not too distracting, where I didn't enjoy the movie. I still also enjoyed it quite a lot. There was the brutal killing that it's not brutal, but the killing that I enjoyed the most was when the guy, I can't remember the guy, where he tried to stick the electrocution thing inside the pod that the alien was in, and it didn't work, and you just see this sadistic spitting of acid at the guy, and I was just that is just great. I enjoyed that a lot. And yeah, I think if they had a sequel, if there's more to come, I'm very much on board and eager to see which direction it goes next. So on that note, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10, even though it didn't have a strong story, but it was managed serviceable enough. So 8 out of 10.
For me, I would say this movie was borderline inspirational in terms of, because like I said, I want to make movies one day in the future, and just watching this film pretty much had the same feeling. Leaving Dune Part 2, it just had me mesmerized with filmmaking and just storytelling. This movie had everything for me. Like I said, best film of the franchise. Argue with yourselves, people, but I'm giving this a strong 8.5, and you guys need to go and watch it, man. Top 10 films of all time for me.
Yeah, I think this is definitely top 3 movies of the year for me so far. I just for me, it's held back by the story being the weak point. I understand what it's trying to do. I understand that it does that well. But in order for it to be truly great, it also has to be more about something. There has to be something more going on than a sequence of really well created sequences in which cool stuff happens. And the movie's more than this, right? We talked about Andy and the android morality and this idea of creator and creation and all of this. It's all there, but it's not really driving the movie as much. I think the set pieces where they basically created a sandbox and kind of started playing with the toys that the other alien movies created. And it does that really well. It's not a put down. That's not damning with faint praise or anything like that. That stuff is really, really good. And that's the thrill of the movie. But in order to stay, it didn't stay with me like Dune 2 did, like Planet of the Apes did, because of the lack of emphasis on story. And for that reason, it's a 5 out of 7 for me. Really good, not perfect, not the best, but really good. And it makes me hopeful again for the Alien franchise, because it's one of those things where it's kind of been short on new ideas that actually work and are actually interesting. And this has stuff going on, right? And you can absolutely build something on this. I want them to do more like this.
That's a resurgence for Predator Prey, and our resurgence for Alien because of Romulus.
Yeah. This actually kind of also makes me a bit more optimistic for Predator movies, right? Because now, imagine a Predator vs. Alien movie made by these people. Right?
Damn.
Right? I imagine they would do cool things with this. So just do it. I'm there.
I'm gay, man. I'm excited now. Danny G. Yeah, I think we should end it off like that, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion. Fede?
Yeah, comment down below your thoughts. What did we catch? What did we miss? What did you love about the movie, or what did you not like about the movie? And of course, we're on the road to 100 subscribers. It means a humble 100 subscribers. So if you're enjoying the content, you're enjoying the discussions, you want to continue rocking with us, then hit the subscribe button, like, and of course, share with more people.
Thank you very much for tuning into today's episode, like I said, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.